Hello, everybody, and welcome to the NBA Trade Zone podcast, where we talk all things NBA trades, past, present, and future. Hi, guys. My name is Daniel.
And I am Sebastian, and today we are going to discuss the Jimmy Butler trade that just happened. We'll discuss some positives and negatives of the trade, and then we will go on to see if there are any moves that, especially Philadelphia, can make to really shore up their team and see if they can make a run for a championship this year.
Yeah, I'd also like to discuss some winners and losers of the trade and essentially analyze what went down and also discuss some of the other offers the 76ers had the Timberwolves had on the table and which offer we felt would have been best or worst or what. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. We had Robert Covington, Dario Saric, Jared Bayless, and a second-round pick, I believe, in 2022, going to Minnesota for Justin Patton and Jimmy Butler. Bayless and Patton and that second-round pick are pretty irrelevant in this deal, at least for now. So it's essentially Saric and Covington for Jimmy Butler. So what are your feelings on this trade in terms of Philadelphia here?
I think Philadelphia gets the best player in the deal, which I like, and I feel like anytime you get the best player in the deal, you are going to win the trade. Now, I am a little bit surprised that Philadelphia had to give up that pick in this deal.
Well, it's a second-round pick in 2022.
Wait, Philadelphia? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was a second-round pick. Yeah, it's...
No, that's fine then. Yeah, I think that deal is pretty fair. Covington and Saric are good role players. We don't know exactly who Saric is yet or what he's going to be, but we know damn well that Robert Covington is going to be the player that he is today. Saric's fit is good with the team, and it's also his Covington's, but I think by adding Jimmy Butler, who's made, the 4 past All-Star games, has really averaged, all-around game with 22, 5, and 5 or 22, 5, and 4. I think by adding him and then adding his work ethic is really going to help this team, at least in the near future.
Yeah, again, I've always been a little skeptical about Jimmy Butler, not because of his talent. He's definitely a superstar in terms of talent, but I don't know. I think out of all the superstars that are available next year in free agency, and granted, I don't think most of them are. I believe most of them will stay with their team. So I do feel like Philadelphia had to make a trade for this, and granted, what they gave up is not that much, at least not what many people would expect. But Jimmy Butler is 30 years old, and he's been run into the ground by Tom Thibodeau. I really don't know how long he will be able to sustain superstar type performances and a superstar type level. So I think this is definitely a win now move, but I think this might kind of harm Philadelphia's future in about 3-4 years. I think Jimmy Butler's got about 2 great years left, maybe 1, maybe 3. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope that even if he does, he's bound to degrade a little bit in about 4 years, but I hope his performance doesn't drop on too much, and still at least they'll be able to validate the max contract or the near max contract that they will undoubtedly offer him, and that he will most likely accept, because they'll be able to offer him a deal over 5 years, which is, I think, his main reason for requesting this trade now.
Yeah, I think I disagree with you when you talk about how most players are going to stay. We've really seen a lot of player movement, especially top player movement for the past few years with LeBron, Durant, Kawhi, Jimmy, all these players asking out.
But there's all through trades besides.
But they're asking out, and I foresee a future where Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid realize that they don't like playing well together, and they do ask to be traded. One of them asks to be traded. And then, Philadelphia's going to have to be stuck with a decision. So I like this move for the reason that, and I was listening to Elton Brand, who is the current GM. He was on a podcast, I believe, on Zach Slow podcast, and he was talking about how he believes that the window for this team to win isn't in 10 years. It's in the next 2 to 3 years. And I kind of agree with him, because I do foresee a future where one of the 2 stars isn't really happy there and does request to be traded.
That's interesting. I don't see that. I don't see Ben Simmons. I definitely don't see Embiid leaving. I think he loves Philadelphia. I mean, I think it's simple. I think if they're not winning, then yes, maybe one of them will request out. Hell, maybe both of them will request out. But I don't know. It seems like they both work real hard, and I mean, they complement each other pretty well.
I don't know if I agree with you there. I
On
mean,
which one?
and that they complement each other.
Well, I get where you're coming from. I think
They both want the ball in their hands. They both, unfortunately, Simmons isn't a good shooter, which is something that's kind of needed for Joel Embiid. And I mean, I just don't see them having this great chemistry on the court when I watch them play.
well, and I think that's partially because Ben Simmons hasn't developed. I mean, at least hasn't improved so far in this season two, like people expected him to. And I think that's where the problem comes in. I mean, Joel Embiid's been playing like a superstar, like a damn near an MVP, but I think people were expecting more out of Ben Simmons that he hasn't quite shown yet. But I mean, I don't see why I don't see any problems with them in the future, at least with their chemistry. They need to add shooters. I don't disagree with you there, but I think if they add some shooters, I think those two players will complement each other really well. And I don't know. I mean, Ben Simmons. I don't know how Ben Simmons feels about really needing to score. I think he wants to distribute more than anything.
I agree he wants to distribute, but I think he still wants to have that ball in his hands, and he wants the offense initiated through him. And a lot of times what you see is Joel Embiid is the one that the offense is initiated to for good reason. But so I do feel like there may be a time when they realize that there might be a better situation out there, and I could definitely see Ben Simmons requesting a trade sometime in the near future. So I do think that this gamble for the 76ers is worth it. Now, was it the player that I wanted to the 76ers to get? No, I think Paul George and Kawhi Leonard were way better fits on the team. But, obviously, San Antonio wanted one of the two stars in this deal, and you could understand why Philadelphia didn't want to part with that. So getting Kawhi, I don't think the Spurs were willing to trade Kawhi for a package of these two players and, let's say, Marco Fultz. If Jimmy Butler was the only option out there, I don't think it's a bad trade, especially when you're just giving up two role players for one All-Star. And, I think that's a trade that's worth it.
Okay, fair enough. Let's quickly jump in. I think we could analyze this trade from Minnesota, but I really don't think there's much point. They get two, like you said, solid role players. I don't think it's going to change much for them. I think this year, I think they'll continue to struggle. Maybe not as bad as they were, but I don't think there's any.
The only thing I'll say is I like the Karl Anthony Towns and Dario Saric fit. That's
Okay.
the only thing I will say.
Okay, that's fair. I really wanted to quickly go over with you. So going over through some of the trades offers that were reportedly proposed. Now I say reportedly because we don't know. But I think the offers that were out there that were last reported were essentially, I mean, Houston was offering a slew of different packages. Let's go over two of the main ones. They had Eric Gordon and a couple of first round picks, or four first round picks in the future. And then the Pelicans offered Nikola Mirotic and an unprotected first round pick. And I know originally Miami had offered Josh Richardson and a first-round pick, but I know they took that back when they realized how Josh Richardson was playing. So let's just say if you had the the three offers that I just mentioned, Houston, four first-rounders, Houston with Eric Gordon and a couple of first-round picks, 2, 3, nobody really knows, and or Nikola Mirotic and an unprotected first-round pick from New Orleans. And, of course, Philadelphia's offer. Which one of those four picks would you have selected? And where would you rank Philadelphia's offer amongst those offers?
Yeah, I mean, once again, the question with the first four first-round picks is what are the protections? The 2025 pick had to be protected in some way, because I do feel like if it wasn't, that's the no-brainer deal. If you can get four first-round picks, I mean, I know obviously Tom Thibodeau pretends like he wants to be winning, but obviously this team's not going to, even with this deal that they made now, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs just because of the amount of good teams there are in the West. So I think, the best thing would be is take the four first-round picks. Now, like I'm saying, the next 2 to 3 years, they're probably not going to be very good first-round picks, but those later ones, I'm guessing, had to be pretty heavily protected. So I don't believe that deal is as lucrative as it sounds. The deal with Nikola Mirotic, again, if it was this year's first-round pick, now, again, the Pelicans are not playing great basketball, but I feel like it's going to end up pretty much at the same spot that the Bulls got the Pelicans pick from last year, somewhere in the lower 20s. Now that for Nikola Mirotic might sound like a better offer. Mirotic is probably the best player between Saric Covington, but he's a little bit older than Saric, and they kind of have very similar games. So I think I would rather have Saric in that deal. Now that pick would be nice. Again, to me, it's kind of like a even deal. Eric Gordon's probably is a really good player, but again, you'd get him for 2 years. And then those picks, again, it depends on the protections. What are those protections? Now, I'm not so happy about the pick in 2019 and the pick in 2021 because I do believe the Rockets are going to be playoff teams at least.
So, where exactly are you ranking Philadelphia's offer from your viewpoint?
Honestly, I think that was the best deal.
You think that was the best deal? Okay, and so here's my analysis of that. I mean, I think the worst offer is Houston's offer of Eric Gordon and the 2 first-round picks. And I say worst very loosely because I kind of disagree with you. And I say kind of because here, Houston is struggling right now. Now, they get Jimmy Butler. Who knows? Obviously, they'll improve some games. I think that's pretty obvious. But even if, let's say that pick falls somewhere in the early 20s, and so does the 2021. Now, another thing I disagree with you about, I don't think there was many protections on those picks just because adding protections to those picks would have been rough. Based off the fact that you can't really trade consecutive picks, so you can't put too many protections. You can't really put like a protection on that 2025 pick and convert it to later picks because you can only trade picks up to 7 years ahead. So I don't think there was many protections on that trade. Now, I think I like Nikola Mirotic just as much as I like Robert Covington, but again, those both players are 28, which is little past the timeline that I envision Minnesota being good. I envision those players already being a little older than I think they would like for them to be, both Covington and Mirotic. So the way I'll rank the offers for me is number 4, Eric Gordon, just because I don't think he's been struggling this year, and B, he definitely doesn't fit Minnesota's timeline, and the 2 second-round picks. Number 3, I'll rank Mirotic and a unprotected first because I think that unprotected first is nice. And I like Nikola Mirotic. I think he's a good player, but again, I don't know how much he fits Minnesota's timeline by the time they'll be good. And plus, not to mention, he could potentially become a free agent after this year. The 2, I will rank Philadelphia's offer of Saric Covington because I do like Saric as well. And as much as I've said that I don't know how much Covington is about to be 28, I don't know how much he fits Minnesota's timeline by the time they'll be good. And number 1 by a long shot. I would take those 4 first-round picks. Now, you could play hard to get hardball a little bit here, but I would take those 4 first-round picks in a heartbeat. Houston has a losing record now. Even if they get Jimmy Butler, they still would not have much depth at all. That pick could potentially be between 20 and 22. Same thing with the 2021 pick. That could even be a little higher, between 15 and 18. And who knows what will happen with those 2023 and 2025 picks, but those could be high picks. I would take that trade in a heartbeat. Thibodeau's job was on the line, and I think the only reason why he took that Philadelphia offer is because he wants to win now to save his job, and it's not going to happen. He is not going to save his job, but guess what? He did what is going to help him and not necessarily what is going to help this team in the future. I don't blame him, but I do blame the owner a lot for not getting involved more and taking Houston's 4 first-rounders. I think that will haunt them in the long run.
Again, if those were 4 unprotected picks, I would agree with you. I just don't see Houston agreeing to that.
I do, because I think they're desperate. I think Morey's desperate. Daryl Morey.
Yeah, he's also a pretty good GM, so I don't see him selling out the future like that without protection. Again, it's one of those things that why are we talking about it if we don't really know what were those picks? Because again, if those were non-protected, I would agree with you, but
I just think it would be extremely hard to protect those picks based off the different limitations that are out there in terms of trading first round picks. But real quick, if you wouldn't mind, give me a list of a couple winners and a couple losers here. They could either be out of the dark winners and losers or big winners and losers, but I want to hear
Well, I think there's some middling teams in the West that are winners, just because this kind of takes the Minnesota Timberwolves out of the race.
Like
now,
that.
again,